Have you ever longed for something? Really, really longed for it? Perhaps even longed for it for a very, very long time. And what then happens if you get it? But it's not quite how you expected it to be. In fact, you're confused by it and you don't understand what's happening. This isn't how you planned it in your mind. It wasn't meant to be like this. And so you do or say something inappropriate out of your confusion and your surprise. Well, this is what has happened to Peter in today's gospel reading. And I must say, I think that if I was in Peter's position, my reaction would have been very similar to his. The Jewish people had longed for a Messiah, a person anointed by God to return his people to faithful worship, a person who would make three key things happen so the people of God could once more be the people of God. And these three things, firstly, to rebuild or to cleanse the temple so that its focus would once more be God rather than making money and lining the pockets of those in authority. Secondly, to be anointed, the rightful successor to King David, to sit on King David's throne, removing the puppet kings that ruled over Judea at the time, Herod and the others who occupied the throne only at the behest of the Romans. And third, to drive out those occupying Romans, to return the land to the Jewish people. This was the Messiah the Jewish people awaited and had longed for a very, very long time. And then, at the point that you realize you have found this Messiah, the person who will make all of this happen, the person who will give up, who you have given up your business as a fisherman to follow, this person tells them that they must suffer, be rejected, must be killed, must die. Well, that doesn't sound like the Messiah you've been expecting. Okay, he says something about rising again, whatever that might mean. But this isn't how it's meant to be. The Messiah is meant to defeat those who stand in his way of restoring God's people. He's not meant to be killed by them. This is not how it's meant to be. And so Peter points this out. In the version we heard, we're told that Peter rebuked Jesus. Now, this seems rather harsh. Rebuke being another word for, at the lesser end, criticize, but it moves through to admonish and even to scold. But perhaps points to Peter's disappointment in what this person, who moments before he thought was the Messiah, what this person is now saying. Interestingly, in Luke's account of these events, we're not told that anyone raises an objection to Jesus' prediction. Whilst in Matthew, we're told what Peter said when he took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him, where Peter says, "Never, Lord, this should never happen to you." Now, this doesn't sound harsh to me, but it still gets the same reaction. Get behind me, Satan. I must say, I've always thought, until I started looking at this in greater detail, this seemed a bit of an overreaction by Jesus, especially as I'm sure that Peter's rebuking of him is, though out of confusion, was principally out of concern and care for Jesus. He didn't want his teacher to die. A perfectly natural reaction, or generally a perfectly natural reaction to our teachers. And therefore, Jesus' response, with its similarity to how he responded to his temptation by the devil when he was in the wilderness at the start of the ministry, then he said, "Away from me, Satan." This seems a bit harsh. But maybe Jesus' response, being the same as his response to the devil, is to be expected, because just as the temptations of the devil were intended to derail the plan for salvation of humanity and the restoration of our relationship with God, Peter's concern also puts the plan off track. Indeed, Jesus tells Peter that he is focused only on human concerns and doesn't understand the bigger picture, the concerns of God. Peter is focused on what he wants and expects, not on God's plan. And for those of you sitting there worrying about Peter and his relationship with Jesus, Peter will get over this, and he will go on to make further gaffes and mistakes, including denying 3 times that he even knows Jesus. But he will be restored to a right relationship with him. And of course, he will go on to bring many, many people to become followers of Christ, as we read in the early chapters of the book of Acts. And even though Peter repeatedly gets things wrong, he doesn't give up. He eventually gets with the program, as some Americans might put it, and plays a major part in building the kingdom. But I think there's something else here for us to reflect on and to learn from. Mark's is a great gospel to read, quite apart from the speed of its progress. In fact, if you sit down to read it in one go, it will take you about an hour. And when I've done this, I've finished feeling quite exhausted because of the speed and the energy with which he tells his account. But the other noticeable thing is how critical of the disciples he is. How his account shows how slow they are to get what Jesus is talking about. The disciples, as told to us by Mark, are not a particularly quick-witted bunch. And this is perhaps because most scholars think that Mark was a follower of Peter, and so much of his account is probably told to him by Peter. And so maybe Mark assumed all the disciples struggled at times, just as Peter does. And I also think that perhaps this helps us when we struggle with reading Scripture. We can draw some comfort that the disciples also struggled with what Jesus said. Now, of course, though the gospel writer, when he sat down to write his account, he already knew the outcome. He already knew what after 3 days rise again meant, as indeed we do, having over the years marked the crucifixion on Good Friday, followed by the resurrection on the Sunday. But to the disciples, hearing Jesus say these words for the first time, it must have been very confusing, especially after they had just realized who Jesus was, realizing that he was God's anointed one, that is, the Messiah or Christ, because that's what anointed means. It means Messiah, and the Greek version of that is Christ or Christo. And understandably, Peter's preoccupation is in what he knows and what is important to him. He hasn't yet understood the big picture, and so naturally focuses on what he does comprehend, the bit of it that impacts on him. And I wonder how often we do this. I wonder how often we only accept and take notice of the things that reinforce what we expect to happen and react badly when presented with the unexpected. The media feeds on this today. It makes money out of keeping us engaged in what they present to us, whether this is newspapers telling us stories that reinforce our view of things, so we continue to buy these papers each day or each week, or social media that continues to feed us material that its algorithms calculate will reinforce our views so that we spend longer on their platforms. In my case, Facebook knows I like whippets, so offers me lots of pictures of them, and I must say I do enjoy that it does that for me. The risk of this, though, is that it reinforces our views of the world and can make them narrower and narrower. If we only hear what we already know, we learn nothing new. And of course, politicians realize this as well, as you can see in the way that political leaders such as Donald Trump or Nigel Farage focus on immigration because they think it will reinforce the views of their supporters and so encourage them to continue watching, and they hope will encourage them to vote for them. But what this narrow approach does, or at least what it doesn't do is show us the whole picture. For example, the impact on a range of services by not being able to recruit staff, that large proportion of universities that are now in financial difficulties because of the restrictions that have been placed on overseas students coming, those overseas students who have been subsidising the cost of study for UK students for many years. I use this only as an example to show how a narrow view of a subject can skew our understanding. If we don't see the wider picture, the bit we see might mean we fail to understand what's going on and why. Some of you might remember a TV advert from some years ago. In fact, it was from 1986. I looked it up for the Guardian newspaper. It shows a skinhead running around the corner of a street. The next view shows him grabbing at a man's briefcase as though he's trying to mug him. And then the camera moves out a bit to show more of what is going on. And we see that the skinhead is actually pushing the man out of the way of a load of building materials that are falling from a scaffold. Far from mugging the man, the skinhead is actually saving the man's life. And the caption at the end of this short advert is, "It's only when you get the whole picture that you can fully understand what's going on." If we only look at what we want to see and allow ourselves to be blinkered by our prejudices and expectations, we can misunderstand and misjudge what is happening. This is what Peter, by being focused only on the human concerns and not having in mind the concerns of God, was doing in the reading this morning. He didn't understand the importance of Jesus giving himself up to be crucified. But this is big stuff that we're dealing with. So don't be surprised, and I am not surprised, that we do get confused by it. But what is important is that, like Peter, when we get it wrong, when we get confused, we must not only focus on our own views of the world and continue arguing with others, but must see things with others who don't see things as we do. Or indeed, more importantly, we must not give up. Instead, we must be open to learn. We must be open to see things differently. We must be open to see things from the perspective of others. And so, through that learning, be prepared to change and to try again. Amen.
Nadine, would you like to start our notices?
Good morning, everyone. Wow, what a fabulous day we had yesterday, didn't we? What a fun time. From the walk-in, the beating of the bounds in the morning, to the fun afternoon, and then the barbecue. I would like to say a huge thank you, because these things don't just happen, as we all know, without a lot of hard work. So a big thank you to everyone who made yesterday possible. From the bottom of my heart, it was just fabulous to just stand there and look at everyone, from babies in arms to the other end of the scale, just having such a fun time. So thank you very, very much, everyone.
Thank you, Nadine. And if I could add my thanks as well, and particularly thanks to those who stayed at the end to clear up and put the church back to being a church ready for this morning. A few other notices for you. A reminder that this afternoon there will be teas here in church between 2:30 and 4:30. So if you fancy a cup of tea and a bit of cake, do please come along and help support that. And this is the penultimate one. I think the last one of the summer season will be in 2 weeks' time. But as always, if you are able to help, please do have a word with Natalie. This evening, if you're not coming to Evensong at Halton, there will be, here in St Mary's, there will be an evening of Michaelmas madrigals. Wendover Choral Society are putting on a concert of madrigals. There is no need to have a ticket. There are no tickets, but there will be a collection in aid of church funds. So if you're able to come along to support that, please do so. And in the process, you will be helping the church as well. Next Sunday, we will be celebrating Creation Tide when we have got Dave Furs from St Peter's Quarrendon, a very, very interesting church, and all the work that they've been doing relating to the environment and also the wider community. But Dave will be coming to preach both at the 9 o'clock and the 10:45 services. And as the focus will be Creation Tide and how we care for creation, suggestion that we perhaps could do a little bit ourselves. So if you normally drive to church, think perhaps about doing a car share with someone else that drives to church, or possibly even cycling or running or walking if you prefer. I was going to say canoeing, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to canoe along the stream, so perhaps canoeing won't be such a good idea. But think of some other way that you might be able to come to church where your impact on the planet is lessened. And then some advanced notices for you coming up in October and November. A reminder that on the Saturday, the 5th of October, we'll be having a wedding fair here in St Mary's. They may have had one down in the village yesterday, but ours is going to be much, much better, I'm sure. So please do come along and support that. There will be various ways that it is primarily as a fundraiser and also to encourage people to use the church for their weddings, but there are various ways that you could get involved in helping, whether that's being a parking steward, for which you will be allowed to wear a high-vis coat. Gosh, that's exciting. Bakers to make cakes for the teas, and then serving those teas. When we did the wedding dress fair, whenever that was sort of 15, 16 months ago, we made a lot of money for the church funds from the teas. So if you are able to help with that, that would be wonderful. Again, see Natalie if you are able to help in any way. And then on Friday, the 25th of October, there will be a barn dance here in church. And then, seems an awfully long way away, the nights will have drawn in, it will be getting cold and wintry. What better way than to spend, I know, I like cheering people up, what better way to spend a Saturday evening on the 30th of November than coming here and having a lot of fun, doing a quiz with a bit of a difference. So those are some notices of things that are coming up.